So the NBA trade deadline has passed. 28 teams made some sort of moves leading up to the trade deadline, and one of the two teams that did not make any moves whatsoever was the Chicago Bulls. Yes, the Chicago Bulls stood pat. They stood pat in a season which most would consider to be a disappointment thus far, a season where they have fallen well below expectations, a season that has been met with frustrations, inconsistencies, and clearly a team that is not constructed well together. And yet, they stay idle at the deadline, while a lot of other teams in the East got better. Boston made moves to get better. The Bucks made moves to get better. Even the Sixers advanced their teams a bit. The Knicks added Josh Hart. The Hawks added Saddiq Bey. The Raptors added Jakob Poeltl. Like, if you're not improving the overall roster while the rest of the conference looks to improving it better, what are we even doing here? Now, I get it. You don't just make a move for the sake of making a move. If we're being honest, given the Bulls don't have a ton of draft capital to work with in a trade, they don't have any first-round picks that they can trade until 2027. They only have one second-round pick for which they can trade, to my understanding. Like, without draft assets, it's very hard to make any moves of substance. But come on now. No moves whatsoever? What else does this front office need to see to show all of the flaws and holes within this roster? And look, it would be different if this was just an isolated thing where the front office just stayed quiet for this particular trade deadline. But they stayed pat last deadline, made little moves of substance in the offseason. You're talking about over a year of seeing this roster and what has been needed, and yet you don't make any moves. And what makes it more frustrating is you see some of these other trades, like even small moves to help on the margins. Mo Bamba getting moved to the Lakers for basically nothing. Saddiq Bey getting traded for second-round picks, although the Bulls didn't have second-round picks, but still, I'm sure they could have put together some sort of compelling offer. Hell, Jakob Poeltl, Jared Vanderbilt, Seth Curry was a guy that I wanted that ended up not getting moved, but to explore the fire sale in the Brooklyn to get some added shooting, something. Not saying there needed to be a blow-up of this roster or a major blockbuster trade, but you can't sit there and tell me that standing pat at the deadline makes sense for the Bulls. Not with the way this team has been playing and the poor roster construction that was pretty clear since the beginning of the season and that it wasn't going to work out. Now, Arturas Karnisovas will be speaking to the media shortly, depending on when you're watching this. He likely already has or is in the middle of it, and I'm sure the common theme is going to be continuity. We like the guys that we have, we need them to stay healthy. We'll keep grinding, we need Lonzo Ball back, and when we're healthy, we were a top team in the East. That's gone now, man. Regardless of Lonzo Ball coming back, the identity, heart, and grit of this team has fundamentally changed since then. They're not into it like they used to be, and I find it hard to believe that one guy in Lonzo Ball is going to be changing that. A few challenges I see here with the Bulls not making any moves at the deadline, because again, yes, I don't like the notion of making moves just to make moves. But you have 4 players who are expiring contracts set to become free agents, whether restricted or unrestricted. These players being Nikola Vucevic, Javonte Green, Coby White, and Dosunmu. I guess Goran Dragic too, since he's on a 1-year deal, but I have a hard time seeing the Bulls re-signing him at his age. For those 4 guys, you're not going to be able to pay all of them this offseason without going into the luxury tax, and we sure as hell know with the cheap-ass Bulls ownership of the Reinsdorfs won't be going into the luxury tax because they never do. It's very possible that you could lose 1 or 2 of those players for absolutely nothing. My guess is it's most likely going to be Coby White and Javonte Green. With the way Coby White has been playing, exceptionally better. You had an opportunity to take advantage of him and having a higher trade value than he did last season, and now you run the risk of losing him for nothing because you won't be able to afford keeping him around anything above the qualifying offer, which I'm sure there will be some teams that will offer Coby more than that, and the Bulls will not be able to match because that would mean going into the luxury tax. Vucevic, now I do expect we'll likely hear that Vuce is going to be getting some sort of extension in the coming days, which honestly he has deserved. He's been the Bulls' second most productive player this season and the second most efficient player on the team. And since he wasn't traded at the deadline, the last thing you want to do again is lose him for nothing. Sign-in trades aren't that easy to do, contrary to what most people think. But regardless, there is still a world where you might lose Vuce in free agency. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent, unless of course the Bulls offer him an extension. Is he even going to want to re-sign with the Bulls given his diminished role and being at the back end of his career on an average team? It's possible Vuce doesn't want that. There were a lot of other reports floating around that the Bulls and Knicks were engaged extensively in talks in sending Lavine to the Knicks for a pretty substantial package, but I don't know how credible those reports were. A lot of the folks making those statements on Twitter were Twitter Blue accounts or reporters I had never heard of. Never saw those reports coming out from any of the Bulls beat writers with the exception of Joe Cowley, and Cowley is not the most credible source on the Bulls beat. That would have been interesting though, because people were talking about the Bulls getting Obi Toppin, Quentin Grimes, Evan Fournier, Derrick Rose, and 3 first-round picks for Zach Lavine. That would have been a pretty solid haul for Zach, especially when you factor in the Bulls have limited draft picks to work with for the future, and bringing Rose home would have made for a nice story for the Bulls. But the move doesn't really check out unless you're really tearing it down, because it would be a very head-scratching move to ship out Lavine and try and build around DeRozan and Vucevic with draft picks and young players for the future. Of course, the rumors surrounding Alex Caruso and the Bulls seeking 2 first-round picks for him obviously didn't materialize. If it was true, I would imagine no team was willing to give up that much for Caruso, and the Bulls weren't willing to budge on anything less, which is the right call. Caruso is one of your better players in terms of box plus minus. He's by far and away your best defender, one of the better defenders in the league, and you shouldn't look to just ship him away because you feel you need to get some value. 2 first-round picks for Caruso would have been worth it, but anything less than that, no, that's a pass. So we'll have to sit and wait and hear from AK, hear the rationale for why the Bulls decided to stand pat yet again this trade deadline, the justification for this roster construction, and what the overall goal and plan is for the future. I'm sure he's going to be getting grilled by questions from the media who have been wanting to talk to him for a while, but he's remained MIA during this up and down season. I'm sure he'll get asked questions about any players they might be looking at off the buyout market, which I swear, if the Bulls bring in Westbrook or John Wall to this crew, it's going to be that much more frustrating. But rather the Bulls just stay put with what they have, considering no trades were made, than adding guys who are well past their primes and don't fit any need on this roster whatsoever. But yeah, not good. Not a good deadline for the Bulls. Like I said, I didn't expect them to make any major moves, and to be honest, I didn't really want them to make any major moves in completely overhauling the roster mid-season, although it would have been intriguing nonetheless. But I'm surprised that not even smaller moves, smaller trades to help on the margins were made, to even just improving their shooting, their rim protection, adding some size, depth in the front court, something. Nah, doing nothing is unacceptable. Obviously, as a passionate fan, I hope this Bulls team can still turn things around, because we've seen them play well at various points in the season. They have a lot of talent, but the overall roster construction isn't great, and I have a hard time seeing this team really making any meaningful noise without changes being made. But let me know what you guys think. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.